Hi and welcome to Conversations with Robyn. Today's guest, Dr. John Demartini, best-selling author, international speaker, and one of the amazing teachers on the film that is taking the world by storm, The Secret. John, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Well, thank you for having me.
I mean, there's so many things we can say about The Secret, and it's just, when you first agreed to be part of The Secret, what was the feeling you had, if any, about the supposed success of how it would be?
Well, I found out about it before I was to go to a Transformational Leadership Council meeting where there's 33 of us, organized by Jack Canfield, we're all experts in the field of transformation, personal development.
Yeah.
So we all were meeting, and we were told that there was going to be a surprise filming there. And we didn't get all the details about it. And then when we got there the first day, Rhonda Burn and a couple other people were there, Drew Harriet, who's the producer and director. They showed us a trailer of the movie that they had put together. And we all looked at each other at the end of that, and we were inspired by it. And some of us had tears in our eyes. And we thought, wow, we just had this instinct or intuition that this is going to go places. And so when we saw that, they asked if we'd like to participate, and we pretty well unanimously said, absolutely. We'd love to be able to share a message based on the teachings that have stood the test of time.
Okay. And how long ago was this?
This was now 2 years ago, I guess it was. We did it in July of 2 years ago.
2005?
Yeah.
Okay, because we're now May 2007.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Do you know how many DVDs have been sold to date?
I don't know with certainty because there's been some underground stuff I've seen too. People have been copying stuff. But I was told about 2+ million now. Wow. But I don't know what's true because I've seen different reports on it, but I think at least a couple million have been sold, at least. Okay. And I know there's been probably 1 billion people that have watched it because I know in Africa alone, I've had the opportunity to speak either before or after the showing of it. And there may be 600, 700, 1,000, or 400 people, depending on the cinema size, watching this. But not everybody buys one. So there's literally millions of people that have watched it that have not necessarily purchased yet. But now that the sales are picking up behind the watching, because a lot of people were watching it and there was no availability to the purchase. It was just being watched by somebody showing it. So I don't know what the totals are, but I've heard it's at least a couple million.
And so you're saying, though, that about 1 billion people on the planet have actually had access to it on some level?
Well, I don't know with certainty, but I have the sense of it because I know there were 9 million people just in one country of Africa that watched it on television. And I believe your country in Australia has viewed it.
Yes.
And then it's been shown in churches, it's been shown in universities, it's shown in corporations, it's been shown in public things, it's been shown in people's homes, it's just spread. And so I know there's millions and millions of people, because in every country that I've done business with or have networks in, there are people going crazy with The Secret. I mean, in Japan, in Manila, in Philippines, in China, in Africa, and I mean, Spain, all over the place. Before they even got them dubbed into those languages, people are watching it.
So what is the secret to The Secret as far as the reason it's taken off and gained such acceptance?
Well, I think everybody wants to live a magnificent life and fulfill what they're striving for. And the secret is reminding people of the capacity they have to create the life that they love. And it's giving them tools and a reminder of the power they have to create. See, our innermost dominant thought tends to move us in the direction of what we want to create in life, and it tends to draw into our life things that match it. And I always say, if you don't plant flowers in the garden of your mind, you're going to forever pull weeds. And if you don't decide what you want in life, somebody else decides for you. And everyone is already living the secret unconsciously. But to take command and make it conscious is wisdom. So what people are doing is they're being reminded to take command of what they really want to concentrate their thoughts on and their actions on and their feelings towards, and define how they want their life. Because if they don't define, somebody else does. It was Parkinson, a gentleman named Parkinson, who created a law that says that any space and time that's not filled with high priority things will automatically get filled with low priority things. And in our mind, if we don't concentrate on things that are really priorities and really inspiring to us, we we will automatically have our mind filled with things that are lower priority. And so we tend to let, without effort, we tend to let other stuff fill our minds and scatter our thoughts and things if we don't concentrate on how we want. And so the secret is reminding us of the power we have to concentrate our thoughts on how we want our lives instead of how we don't.
Okay. When did you personally, which is obviously a number of years before you were part of the film, when did you personally start living The Secret on a positive level? And how did you come across it?
Well, I was told in first grade by a first grade teacher in front of my parents that I had learning difficulties and disabilities and dyslexia, and that I would never be able to read, write, or communicate, never amount to anything, never go very far in life. So from 7 to 17, that was a belief. And I filled my mind with that thought. I assumed it was true. I had challenges. I didn't know how to read. I didn't read my first book till I was 17. So that was pretty well seemingly true. And I only made it through elementary school with the help of the smartest kids in the class by learning to ask questions to them, because I learned that the quality of our lives are based on the quality of the questions we ask. And I started asking questions. What did you get from the class day? And what did you learn from reading that book? And I got enough information to pass all the way through elementary school. When my parents moved from Houston, Texas to Richmond, Texas, I didn't have that team of people that I accumulated to help me. And I was in a lower socioeconomic area, and there wasn't a whole lot of smart kids in the class, and there was a lot of gangs, a lot of drugs and things. And I didn't have that team, and so I didn't pass. I failed. And I ended up dropping out of school. So by the time I was 13, 14, I was kind of, I guess you could say, I just didn't make it in school. So I was trying to get into sports, and I picked up surfing. And my parents saw that I was struggling in school and saw me excelling in sports, and so they wanted me to kind of have a place where I could excel. I told them I wanted to go to California and to Hawaii to go and ride the big waves. So my parents dropped me off on the freeway with a notarized piece of paper when I was 14 years old, saying my son is not a runaway, he's a boy with a dream. And they gave me their blessings, and I hitchhiked out to California. And on the way to California, I met a bum who became a mentor for a short moment. And he took me into a library. He met me, and he asked if I was a runaway. I said, no, my parents gave me a ride to the freeway. He got a kick out of that. And he said, did you drop out of school? And I said, yeah. And he says, you going surfing? He says, you look funny here in Texas going to surfing. And he says, follow me, I want to teach you something. And he took me to a downtown El Paso library and sat me down at a book table and went off and got a couple books. And it was Aristotle and Plato. And
What, sir?
Plato and Aristotle.
Okay, yep.
And he sat down and he said to me, don't ever judge a book by its cover because it will fool you. And he turned out to be a very wealthy individual just acting as a bum. And then he said, you learn how to read, boy, because there's only two things they can never take away from you, and that is your love and your wisdom. And you learn how to read, and you gain the wisdom of love and the love of wisdom. So that was inspiring on the way to California. Then I made it to California, and I panhandled. I lived on the streets and did all the things that they did in the 60s and early 70s, and eventually made it to Hawaii to surf. And I ended up almost dying of strychnine poisoning there.
Yes, I read that. How did that happen?
Well, it was an interesting thing. I was trying to expand my consciousness through natural means in those days, which is, there were plants that grew over in Hawaii that had added color to your day, let's put it that way.
Magic mushrooms.
And anyway, there was a plant called the wood rose plant, and it had a toxic element in it that damaged my nervous system, and it almost brought asphyxia and I almost died. So recovering from that led me to a health food store to change my diet, and led me to a little class, at a yoga class. And there was a guest speaker named Paul Bragg. And Paul Bragg was a 93-year-old wise man that taught me the secret. And he said that we have a body, we have a mind, we have a soul. And the body must be guided by the mind, and the mind must be guided by the soul to maximize human potential. And that you must dominate your thought on it. You must visualize the way you want your life. You must affirm it, you must feel it, and you must write it down with goals, and you must take actions on it with your energy and never give up on a dream that's in your heart. And he sat and he said, you must set a goal for yourself, your family, your community, your city, your state, your nation, and your world and beyond, and set it for at least 100, 120 years. And he taught me so much. And I had the opportunity to then go and spend time in a private class with him for 3 weeks every morning. And he's the one that taught me the secret. And I cannot say how much this man impacted my life. It's amazing.
And what age was that?
I was 17. It's 10 years after I was told I'd never read. Now that night when I met him, the first night, he said, tonight, whatever you decide with what you want to do with your life will become your destiny. So I want to give you 10 minutes to think about what do you want to dedicate your life to. And I sat there on the floor and I was assuming I was going to be a surfer, making surfboards, living on the shores. But that night something kind of came over me. After being inspired by him and scanning my life and putting it all together, I thought, wow, I was told I would never read, write, or communicate. The guy told me to gain love and wisdom and learn how to read. He's inspired and he's a great wise man. I said, this is inspiring to me. I would love to do this. Whatever this is, I want to do this in my life. So I said to myself that I want to dedicate my life to the study of these universal laws, as he's talking about, particularly as it relates to body, mind, and spirit, and relates to healing as I had a health problem. And I want to become a master teacher here and philosopher, and I want to travel the world and step foot in all the countries of the world and share what I discover and inspire people like this man's just done for me. And so that was 34, almost 35 years. November will be 35 years. And that's all I've ever wanted to do since. And that's why I do what I do today. That's why I travel and speak 400 times a year and, travel. I do nonstop traveling, just speaking all over the world.
We'll take a break and come back and find out more about Dr. John's amazing journey. Stay with us. Welcome back, and we're speaking with Dr. John Demartini. John, before the break, you were talking about your journey. At the age of 7, you were told that you would not amount to anything. What was it specifically that was happening for you at 7, though? Because that's a heck of a label to put on a kid.
Well, when I got into first grade, they put in these little reading circles. And I was in the regular reading circle at first, and I had difficulty. I just couldn't, I had this big book up there, Jane walked the dog kind of stuff, and it just didn't make any sense. I would swap words around, I pronounced things backwards, I didn't get any meaning out of it, I just couldn't do it, and I was frustrated. And so the teacher put me in a remedial class, and I still didn't get it, and there was a lot of kind of criticism at the time. She was an elderly lady and had high expectations and came from a different kind of thinking. And so in those days, this is 50, almost 60, 1959, 60, she put me in a dunce class, and you had to wear a dunce cap.
Literally?
Literally wore a dunce cap. And I remember we had Daryl, this other kid who had learning problems, and I used to sit and face the window, and we had to wear a dunce cap, which I now call a wizard's cap. Turned into a wizard's cap now, but we had to sit out and face the window. We weren't allowed to talk to each other, but we'd have to face the window because we were not doing well in class. So she put me in first regular, then remedial, then dunce class, and finally after that, she asked my parents to come to the school, and we sat in a little reading circle, and I sat there, my mother, my father, and she spoke to me and said, I'm afraid your son's not ever going to be able to read, write, or communicate, never amount to anything, never go over far in life. So that was just what it is. So I just assumed that it was accurate. I did have problems reading. It took me a long time to finally break through that. That was a major breakthrough to finally come back and learn how to read. I didn't do that till I was I was 18 when I really started learning how to read.
So in hindsight, why, now knowing what you know, why was it you weren't able to read at that age?
Well, I guess because of the dyslexia. Yeah. I just worked with a young boy yesterday who had dyslexia. And as I was interacting with him, I was recalling my own childhood. And if he sees something, he can get it. If he tries to read, he can't read. If he tries to verbalize it, he doesn't make sense out of it. And I was just sitting there remembering what it was like. And his strategy trying to get by was the same as mine. He had to ask people what they got out of it, the same thing. It was like talking to myself as a younger age. So yeah, sometimes what happens is you read it and you get so frustrated trying to figure things out, you just want to give up. You don't want to deal with it. And that compounds it, I think. So I had some challenges with that. I was great in school in the sense of sports. I was great in visual things. I was great in art, great in socializing and talking to people. And I could ask questions and ask them what they got out of things, and I could get information that way. But just sitting down and reading it, I just didn't have that. It didn't get any meaning out of it. It didn't make any sense. And I would swap words and make up things, and I would pronounce things, and the teacher would say, that's not what the word, I'll read the word. And I just didn't seem to do well with it. And even to this day, verbally reading, I don't do as well as visual reading. And if you ask me to read something verbally, I sometimes put words in there that aren't there, and I say things sometimes crazy, and I make up words and stuff. And but now I've used it into my advantage because I've got Dr. Demartini's dyslexionary, which is words that I make up that have meaning.
Well, speaking of words, how many books have you written now?
Well, if I put in all the research material and put in all of the manuals for programs, I've got over 250 books. If I put in all the research material, it's over 1,000. If I put in books that are out in the public market, about 40 something, and I got 5 more coming out this year. So I've done a lot of writing over the years now, but a lot of it was for manuals for seminars that I present. And so some of them are 300 pages, 400 pages, 600 pages. Some of them are big manuals, and they're parts of books. But so I've done a lot of writing. And I just recently found, I used to write a lot of my notes on index cards and fill up index cards because I could carry them around with me and I could read books and learn and write them down. And I just found 375,000 stored, and each one is a page of information. So if I added it up, that's a good 1,000 books right there. So I did a lot of, I was in writing. I used to work 18, 20 hours a day on just researching and writing, research and writing, once I got into it. Once I learned I could, and once I went after it, I mean, I became, you know, like a recluse, and just, I mean, when they say you can't read and you find you can, it's like, wow.
A whole new world opening up.
Yep.
And we will talk about your latest book as we move further into the program. Back to your personal journey. So obviously a great deal of studies that happened for you, and then your personal life. I believe you're married to Athena Star Woman. Yeah,
I definitely got involved in studying. I believe it's about 28,000, almost 600 books that I've been blessed to go through. And I've read everything I can get my hands on in every field, about 64 disciplines I think I've documented. And I just love studying and teaching, and so I teach every day. I mean, today was the 152nd speech this year, and here we are in just beginning of May. Yeah, so I do a lot of speaking. But I was doing a program which I love doing called the Breakthrough Experience. This is my signature program. I've done it in over 52 countries. And it's my attempt to do what Paul Bragg did for me, to try to help other people find out what they want to dedicate their lives to and what they want to do with their life and how to go and live amazing lives and teach them the secret. And I was doing one in Walnut Creek, California, and Athena Star Woman, who was from New York, was told by a student in New York, because her father had just passed away, that you need to go to that program to help you with that issue. So Athena Star Woman was sort of an intuitive psychic, as you know, and so she flipped a coin and it said no, and she flipped it again and it said yes, and so she was trying to decide whether to go, and anyway it said to go. So she goes there, and at the airport, as I was being picked up, the lady who picked me up picked her up ahead of time. And so the moment she came by, and they were coming to pick me up, the lights hit the front of the windshield, and I could see her. And the second I saw her, and the second she looked at me, we had a sense that there was something going on. And so then she got in the back seat, and I got in the front seat. I wanted to be in the back seat with her. And we drove to the seminar, and she had a seat right in the front row. The first seat was the only one available, so she had to sit right in the front row. And I noticed myself moving over towards her as I was speaking the whole time. I kept unconsciously getting closer over to her. So we had a lovely beginning and a relationship when we started. And we were together for 12 and a half years.
I was just going to ask, what year did you meet?
Well, I guess whenever that was, let's see, I guess 91, 92, something, 90, whenever it was. I don't remember the exact year. I'd have to go back and count the number of years.
Soulmates?
Well, I always say that whatever your disowned part is represents kind of the soulmate, and so we have complementary opposites. And in many cases we had similarities, but we have definitely had differences. And when we first got together, she used to say, you know, you're up 20 hours a day, and I like to sleep 20 hours a day. We had common threads where we ate sushi together. We could always have something to do with sushi. But we had differences. She was very much into the social world, and I was more into the intellectual world. So we had differences and we had similarities. And I think the Greeks used to say, when you see more similarities and differences, you have infatuation. When you see more differences and similarities, you have resentment. When you have a perfect balance of similarities and differences, you have love.
Wow.
And I think we had that. We had an extraordinary relationship, and I feel graced and blessed to have spent time with her. I mean, she's an amazing lady. Now, we didn't see each other every day because we both had international lives. So we had rendezvous, and we would meet in locations. And we did a lot of telephone conversations, and then we would get together, and of course we had the opportunity to live in different parts of the world, and then we lived also on the ship called the World. And so we'd rendezvous. and we had an amazing life, and I'm very blessed to have that time together.
Okay. Well, thank you. We're going to go to another break, and we'll come back and hear more about Dr. John's life. Stay with us. Welcome back. And John, before the break, was speaking about your relationship with Athena Starwoman. And I believe she passed away from breast cancer.
Yep.
Now, with all the work you do in the world, with the concept of The Secret, the law of attraction, power of positive thinking, there's going to be a lot of people out there who have a disease which may be considered terminal. How do we apply what The Secret says to something like that?
Well, everybody is living their life according to their values. And we sometimes we subordinate ourselves to outside authorities sometimes and inject the values of others into our lives and try to live some life we're not. In other words, we sometimes try to be somebody we're not. Emerson warned against this, and he said, envy is ignorance and imitation is suicide. And our unconscious values are our real values, and our conscious values may or may not match those. So what we say we want in life and what our unconscious values actually dictate are sometimes two different things. Like I ask people all the time how many of you would love to be wealthy? Well, everybody puts their hand up. I said, how many are financially wealthy? And they put their hands down. Most of them do. And I said, but you say you want that, but yet your life doesn't demonstrate that. So unconsciously, what that means is in your hierarchy of values, the things that are really important to you, when you get money, you spend money on things and you don't save it. You don't invest it and study that. So what happens is what you say you want and what you actually want are two different things. And many people with health conditions actually have unconscious motives helping create those health conditions to get things they want. Let me give you an example. I had a lady that she tried, her parents, when she was raising the family, she was very close to kids, and her kids then felt almost smothered, and they disappeared. They literally went to different parts of the world.
To get away from
Well, I won't say just to get away from her, but unconsciously they got jobs that just took them away. And so she didn't have her kids. Well, her kids were everything to her. So she would try to get them to come back and visit her, and it was such a long distance, they just didn't want to do that easily. Well, she would try guilt trips, she would try everything, and nothing she could try to do to get them back. She tried everything. Cancer worked.
Oh, dear.
One moment she got cancer, they all came. And it was her realization during chatting with her, she actually revealed this to herself, that she said, I just wanted to do everything I could to try to find my family together, and I couldn't seem to do it no matter what I did. The only thing that actually finally brought him here was me getting sick. Now, people will unconsciously create things that they're not even realizing they're doing in order to get outcomes that's high on their value list. I had another lady that came into me who was a diabetic and had been doctors all over the place and was pretty well being taken care of by Medicare, Medicaid in the States. And she had a person that was taking care of her, this lovely black lady that was taking care of her and wheeling her around in a wheelchair. She had some ulcers in her legs, her eyes were starting to go, she was breaking down, and she was on insulin. And she came into my office, and I had seen somebody else that had amazing results with some diabetes, literally healed their legs and got back into function, and they dropped their insulin and everything else. And I truly believed, after doing an evaluation of her, that I could help her. And I was presenting her that I was going to be able to help her in the report of findings. I was going to tell her I could really help this lady. She looked at me, and she didn't have a smile on her face, and she looked at me, and after I presented this great news for her, she says, Dr. Demartini, I don't know how to say this, but I'm going to have to pass on this. I said, why? I'm giving you an opportunity. And she says, you see that lovely lady out there in the reception room, that black lady? She's been with me for a number of years now, almost a decade. She takes me places, she feeds me, she bathes me, she wheels me around, she knows my dark secrets, she knows everything about my life, she's my closest loved one. If I get out of this wheelchair and I go and do back to my normal life, the person that's most close to me is gone. I can't take that risk. So I really appreciate what you're saying and everything else, but the value I'm getting out of being where I'm at. I said, well, why is it that you go to doctor and try to get help? She says, well, I guess I've been going around because as long as I'm going and attempting, I get coverage economically. I really don't want to have to face that about myself, but the truth is, I really don't have an intention of doing this. I get more benefit out of doing this. And see, people have unconscious motives, and I've seen this over and over in the health profession, that some people, if they really have a congruent value to bring wellness back to their life, they do. I worked with a lady the other day in an oncology unit who has 38, almost 39 years working in oncology units. She'd been a nurse there. And when you've been working that long in oncology, you've seen a lot of stuff. And she says, we go in there and we have a 92%, about 92% probability knowing who's going to walk out and who's not going to make it. Mm-hmm. We know in advance by their attitude and by their goals and what they're saying and how they talk and what their meanings is. We've narrowed it down and we know who's going to make it.
I've heard that before, actually.
And she said that we know the people that have a will to live and a reason for live and have more motivate to bring wellness back to their life are the ones that do. And there's other people that are fed up, they're tired, they're done, they're not fulfilled in their relationship, they're not fulfilled here, there's all kind of reasons. Now, I'm absolutely certain that I've seen this. I've seen it so many times I don't question it. I know that our unconscious values create our realities. Mm-hmm. And I am certain, I've seen it over and over again, people have diseases sometimes for a motive. Now, Athena had...
Because that's my next question.
That's the next question, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I watched her. Now, this is something that probably is going to shock people, but I sat with her when she was visiting her mother in Melbourne, who was elderly. And I watched her watch her mother, who was in a little retirement house, a little retirement community. I watched her laying on this little bed, and she was kind of, I would have to say, she was kind of shriveled a little bit, and she was aging and things. And I saw Athena's face look at that. And she got a watery eye, and she says, this is not how I want to go. Yeah. And I looked at her, and I said, what are you experiencing? And she says, this is not how I want to be. This is not, Athena Star Woman is not going to pass in that form. She says, I want to die beautiful. When I go, I want to still have my beauty, my youth, my life. And she says, I don't want to go past 60. Now, I remember her saying that. Her friends have seen her say that. And all I know is that she was 59 and a half when she passed. And she never asked for treatment, even though that by the time they found out about it, they said it was too late anyway, because it had metastases to a bunch of areas. So when she said that, it was almost like there's a part of her that honored that. And I almost think that she wanted to be remembered as a beautiful woman, and by God, she was a beautiful woman right to the time she passed. And not everybody could comprehend that, except the closest people that knew her comprehended that. And even though there were moments when she really had a challenge facing that, I really believe inside that there was a part of her that was ready to move on. And she actually had, once she had that realization, she kind of say, well, let's have euthanasia kind of thing. She would say, why do I need to drag this thing out? Let's just allow it. I don't think she had as much of a fear of death as some people would have. I think she understood metaphysically what was life and death. And she said to me one time, we were sitting in our penthouse in Aria in the main beach, and we were having a night, the doctor was there, and we were holding hands and talking to each other. And she said something, and it was really inspiring. She says, we've traveled the world, we've met royalty, we've lived on yachts, we've had penthouses, we've had wealth, we've met amazing people. We've been in the movies, we've done things, and she's an extraordinary woman. She's touched millions of people's lives. She says, I've lived an amazing life. I feel grateful for my life. And I'm grateful that I found my starman, as she called it. And so I think that, she was literally thinking, I'm grateful for this experience, even though she was challenged and even though it was not easy and there was some pain involved when she was going. It wasn't an easy project, but she did it with grace. And she had some moments when she would react, but, and I remember asking her, how do you want me to respond to this? Because there was some people, even in the family dynamic, that wanted to rescue her and save her and everything else. And she says, no, I want to allow myself to go. And she asked it to be quiet. She didn't want media around it. She wanted it to be completely silent, didn't want anybody to know about it. It only got out just days before she was passing. And she wanted to just pass and be on it that way. And it was really challenging to keep that quiet. But at the same time, I had to honor that because that was her will.
How was it for you?
Well, I had...
and yet honouring your wife's...
Well, that was challenging at times. It was interesting. I wasn't there every day. In fact, I could go on, it's a long story, but I had to travel too and do my seminars and things during part of that. And I was in, I believe, Dallas, Texas, and we would chat at night on the telephone. And I knew it was getting close, and I knew I was going to be coming back to Australia. And she said to me, she says, I don't know when I'm going to be passing. I know it's coming soon. And she says, but I want you to do, there's 3 people in my mind that I want to make sure you say something to and share something with, before, if I don't get to. And she told me this in a, I guess you could say it, I don't know how to describe it, but a telepathic kind of connection, because I talked to her on the phone, I went to bed, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I was awoken at 2 o'clock in the morning, and there she was in my mind. It was vivid, I was in a dream or whatever. And she was communicating, she says, I want you to tell these 3 people these 3 things. And it was vivid, it was so vivid that I knew who it was and what it was to say. And I think that she didn't want them to know, because she didn't want to have media and stuff, but at the same time she wanted them to know after it passed. Well, on the day of the passing, literally within 24 hours, those 3 people contacted. And it was really spooky, because it's almost like out of the people that contacted, those 3 people contacted, and I said what she asked me to say. So she definitely there's no doubt about that Athena had an intuitive and a psychic ability. There's no doubt in my mind. She played it down sometimes, and other times she built it up, but the reality is she had an intuitive something, and it was pretty mysterious. And we had that interaction. We could be distant, and we had a connection that was kind of a non-local telepathic communication. And so, yeah, she was an amazing person. But I really believe that she honored the idea of passing, and that she had some challenges, but at the same time, she also knew that was the passing, that was the destiny. I think she wanted to make sure she was beautiful before she passed.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
We've got to take another break, and we'll come back and hear more about John's journey. Stay with us. John, before the break, you were sharing a lot more about Athena. I also read where you say she's guiding you in your life now. Do you want to share a little bit of that with us?
Well, I can't say every day that she's sitting and guiding me exactly, but I would say that there are, when you've been with somebody, you have a connection with somebody. And even though I've moved on with my life and I have a new relationship and everything else, you don't have a disconnection. You have this, love never dies. It's always there. And so I can close my eyes and feel Athena's presence and feel kind of a dialogue, if you will. And she kind of connects sometimes. And what's interesting, when she passed away, people very commonly would say, oh, we're so sorry and everything else. And I used to have to try to help them through it, because I seem to be able to adapt to it. I've developed a methodology that I've worked with thousands of people on how to deal with gains and losses, and probably 500 and almost 600 cases of death. I've gotten to work with it in my programs. So I applied that method, the Demartini method, to my own life in this situation to help me adapt to it. Because I always say that there's never a gain and loss, there's a transformation. And if you honor the transformation, you'll honor the presence of the person as a spirit, not just a form. And I think she believed that, and I really believe that. So there's a connection that's kind of like even though you've destroyed the receiver and the broadcaster of the radio station is still there. So you might say the conscious is still there, but not the form. And it's an intuitive guidance process. But before she passed away, 6 weeks before she passed away, we had a pretty amazing conversation also. We held hands, we looked at each other, and we kind of reminisced on all the things we've gotten to do, and we were grateful for each other and had tears of gratitude. And she said, very distinctly, she said, it's now come a time when you're going to have to find you a nice young new star girl, because your star woman's going on. And that's the farthest thing from your mind at that time. It's like, because you're with her right then. But at the same time, it was something that stuck in your head, And, it was about a month, well, not quite a month after she passed, I ran into somebody. Now, the Sydney Morning Herald said it was in New York, but it was actually in Las Vegas. It wasn't in New York. I don't know why they said New York. I guess because we lived there, they assumed that. But it was in Las Vegas. I actually had a lady who was standing in line to get my book. I was signing a book at the time. And she came to get a book signing. And she came up, and I said, what is your name? And she says, Star. And because Athena said that, yeah. I just asked if she'd stick around for a moment, because I'd like to chat with her. She's a lovely, blonde, attractive lady with a hat on. It was fashion-oriented. And I knew Athena was fashion-oriented, so I thought, well, I'd like to chat with this lady, just because of the name, because I just didn't see that every day. Anybody that had the name Star, I was interested in, just to chat with, So we chatted that afternoon, and I saw her for, I guess that afternoon, 4 hours or so. I chatted with her. We had something to eat, because I didn't have lunch. That was the morning I was speaking, and at lunch, we had a long lunch. And then I didn't see her for a couple months, and then I saw her for about an hour and a half at a luncheon in Texas. And then I didn't see her for another, I guess, a month or so. And then I saw her quickly for lunch. I didn't see her for like 3 months. And then I was getting ready to go to a trip to Australia and asked her if she'd like to go to Australia. And she said, I'd love to. So we developed a relationship. And I think that there was so many synchronicities in that was too spooky to ignore. And I could go off on an hour on that one. But so I felt like that somehow there was a transformation. And it was almost like Athena was saying, you know, you're to find you a new star girl. Now that was a metaphor, I thought, you know, because I just thought, well, you're getting, she wanted me to go on my life. And we already agreed way in advance throughout the whole time we were together that if any one of us passed, that the other one would guarantee that they would get on with their life and live to the fullest. Yep. Because that's what you honor people. See, many people have remorse, bereavement, grief, and sorrow over the death of somebody or loss of somebody, only because they're infatuated with somebody and they put them on pedestals. When you love somebody, they're in your heart and there's no loss. When you infatuate with them, you feel you have the loss, the withdrawal symptoms of loss. When you resent them, you have joy. But when you infatuate, you have the perception of loss. And I felt love for her. And I didn't feel this big loss thing because I kind of felt that she was still there. A lot of people didn't understand that, but I really felt that she's still accessible. And so when Star showed up, I felt like there was like a connection. And what's interesting is, in one of our places in Texas, I have a home in Texas also, and Star lives there. I only pop in there occasionally. And what's interesting is we have pictures of Athena there. And people ask, you know, why is Athena's picture in our place there? And Star says, we're all connected somehow. I don't know how to do it, but there's too many synchronicities to ignore. And she really respects and appreciates, you know, Athena. And so she's, you know, learned about it and studied her and got pictures there. Because she wants to honor it. Just like Athena was married prior to it by a guy named Beautiful Bob, who was a great-looking surfer man that had long blonde hair when she was into the surfing scene. And we still had pictures of Bob because I felt like that's part of her life. As far as I'm concerned, he deserves to be all down in the house too because he's part of her life. And so I feel like that's the way it is with Star. I mean, Athena's still part of my life. And so people don't understand that who don't know her, but Athena, I would love to have had Athena met Star because I think they would have probably hit it off.
Well.
Yeah, I think they'd have hit it off because they're both into fashion and they're both into things and socially connected, and it was quite interesting.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that part.
Yeah.
Touching on bereavement, one of the things in your latest book, just bending down here, which is The Heart of Love, and that's part of what you're promoting out here, isn't it?
Well, one of the products, I've got lots of products and books and things, but the newest book I have is The Heart of Love.
And in here you also talk about bereavement.
I have a whole chapter on that.
So let's look at, say, bereavement with, say, a parent or a child.
Yeah.
Have you had that experience? Are your parents still?
My parents both passed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long ago was that?
Let's see, my mom has been almost 5 years. September will be 5 years. Yeah. My father has been 97, so that's 10 years.
10 years.
Yep.
And did you find a similar, as you spoke about in Athena passing and how you dealt with that, did you find it was the same with your parents? Yeah,
it was interesting. I've worked with so many people that have had deaths in their family that I have a science about it. I'm absolutely certain. And I've worked with people that had double deaths, and I watched a lady in Johannesburg that had 4 kids killed in a car accident at the same time, her kids, all 4 kids. And I've had the opportunity to work with them. And I've studied bereavement and studied these things, and I'm absolutely certain that you can actually transition through that process in a matter of hours. I'm absolutely certain about it. And what's interesting is people don't comprehend that because they're so accustomed to an old model of how, you know, this could take years and stuff. But once you understand how the mind works and how it functions, and I outline exactly how to do it in the book. It's literally a step-by-step process how to do it. So it doesn't have to be months or years or even weeks. It can be hours. It can take a person, because I've had the opportunity in my Breakthrough Experience program, I actually take people every weekend who've had deaths in the family, and I take them through it. Just this last week in New Zealand, I just did that. A lady, we did it, and it didn't even take an hour. We took her through somebody that passed away about a month ago, and we took her through the whole process until she was sitting there with tears of gratitude, honoring the passing.
So are you saying that she would not have any feelings of sadness, grief after that?
Didn't have it.
Nothing.
She's grateful. The only way you can have see, when you're infatuated with somebody and you see way more benefits than drawbacks, then what happens is you create dopamine in the brain, and then kephalons and endorphins in the brain. And then if you withdraw from that, or it goes away from you, you have withdrawal symptoms. And withdrawal symptoms are withdrawal from a dopamine, which is bereavement, grief, sorrow, loss. And the same symptoms you can have are sometimes the same symptoms as an addiction withdrawal. And so what happens is, if you go in there and you bring them off the pedestal and balance out your perceptions and see them as they really are. Because sometimes, see, if you're infatuated with somebody and you just met somebody and you're highly infatuated with them, and then they dump you, you're broken. You have the same symptoms. Withdrawal, broken heart, you're devastated. If you resent somebody and they leave, you joy and you celebrate. So if you have more negatives and more drawbacks and more challenges and supports and benefits and positives, then if somebody leaves you, you have joy. You celebrate. They're gone. Thank God they're gone. But if there's a more positive than negatives, you feel remorse. So those are two polarities that occur. And if you bring those into balance and see people for who they are, not the fantasy you made or the nightmare you've made out of them, but who they are. Because when you live with somebody for a long enough period of time, you find out the things you had them on a pedestal are brought back into balance, and you see them as a person with things you like and dislike. I always say that love is a synthesis of opposites, things you like and dislike. I explained it in the book. When you bring those into balance, whether they come into your life or out of your life, you feel gratitude and love. And so what I do is I've developed a system to ask questions to help them see the new forms that emerge. So when somebody passes, new people emerge in your life. Just like Star emerged in my life. I mean, 2 days after Athena passed, there was a lovely lady that lives on the Gold Coast. I was on the Gold Coast. A lovely lady came by and said, anything I can do for you, if you need to go to dinner or you want me to pick up anything, you want me to do anything for you? And I said, no, I'm working on it. I'm answering emails because 8,000 emails came in.
8,000.
8,000 emails came in. I was inundated with emails.
Hold that thought. We've got to take another break. We'll come back to it. 8,000 emails. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. So, John, moving into the last part of the program, 8,000 emails, my goodness.
I was inundated.
And then some. Just one last question around that area of it. Infatuation. 2-year-old child. How do you explain that to parents? 2-year-old child that perhaps is, run over, whatever.
Well, if they're in 2 years or younger, if it's 3, they might not have that same feeling because they get the terrible 2s then. But I always call it the terrific 1s sometimes become the terrible 2s. If you put your child on a pedestal, you set yourself up for the broken heart if something happened to it. If you love the child, you have a balanced orientation. Love is a balanced orientation. It's not an infatuation. See, most people confuse love with infatuation and dopamine addiction. And that's when they're brokenhearted, when there's a loss. And they think they've got a broken heart. It's actually a broken addiction. True love allows a person to come and go and gives them the freedom to be who they are, not what you project onto them or expect from them. And in my book, The Heart of Love, I teach people and explain to them that distinction. Because the majority of people think that love is this fantasy flavor of the month kind of thing. Love is a balanced state. It says in the marriage vows, for rich or for poor, for happy or sad, for kind or cruel, it's both sides. Yep. And we throw that out and get all caught with the infatuation and what makes us feel good. And that dopamine can blind us to the downsides. And then when we hit the downsides, then we think we've got a loss of love. And then we get resentful and we put them from the pedestal to the pit. And then we don't see the positive sides. And then we become bipolar in this relationship. It becomes too volatile to sustain sometimes. I say maintain it. I teach the people exactly what to do when you're in the beginning of a relationship, how to balance that out by asking questions. I learned it from the Japanese prince and princess. Athena and I were sitting in France at the Ritz Hotel, and the prince and princess were asking each other quality questions because they had an arranged marriage and they were just getting to know each other. And I saw Boris Becker and his wife with an emotional, passionate relationship with infatuation. I saw them with some reason, and I thought, it needs to be put together. You need the passion, you also need the reason. And asking balancing questions can allow you to love the person for who they are, not the fantasy you make out of them. And I think that's essential, because remorse, bereavement, grief is the broken heart from an addiction to infatuation.
Okay, well, you're talking about downsides. For you emotionally, do your buttons get pressed? I often ask this question of guests.
Absolutely.
How often would they get pressed? How long do you stay in that so-called negative space? How do you get out of it?
Well, I wouldn't say it's always negative, because you can get your button pushed by infatuation. That's a button.
Mm-hmm. Yep, true.
I always say anything you're too humble to admit you own or too proud to admit you own in what you see in others is a button that you have to face. So if you're too humble to admit it and you got them on a pedestal, you got an infatuation button. If you're too proud to admit you got the downside, you got a resentment button. Both of those can distract your mind from being present and loving. And I get that throughout my life. I mean, sometimes I look up at somebody and I go, wow, that's amazing, and I get infatuated a little bit, and then they don't live up to my fantasy expectation, and sometimes I get resentful to somebody that challenges my values. But what I do is I have a method to, if I catch myself doing that and it's occupying in my mind any time at all, I pull out my method, dissolve it. So if I'm aware of it, I dissolve it.
What's your method, and is this what you're doing in your workshops now?
In my breakthrough experience that I travel the world speaking about, I teach people the Demartini method, which is a system, a science that's reproducible, it works every time if you work it, on how to dissolve emotional perceptions which hook you and allow you to see the order, the hidden order in life that's always there, and allows you to appreciate and love your life and the people around you. And that is what liberates people, because I always say love, which is the truth, sets you free. But infatuation, resentment puts you in bondage and occupies your mind and distracts you from being present and purposeful and grateful and loving. So my seminars, I do a lot of seminars. I do programs on healing. I do programs on the breakthrough experience. I'm doing one on The Secret. I'm here in Australia doing lots of different programs. I speak every day.
I asked you earlier about the fact that you do travel around 300 odd days a year, and I said, so what happens to your personal life? What was your response to me?
Well, if you realize that a person's personal life is always based on their values. Mm-hmm. I'm in front of millions of people. They're my friends. They're my family. Mm-hmm. And I have beautiful kids. They're growing up. They're in college right now, and one's just about to enter college. And so I Skype a lot of people. I'm talking to people on Skype and on telephones and emails and stuff. But I always say the universe is my playground. The world is my home. Every country is another room in the house. And every city is another platform I get to share my heart message with. So I don't see it. I don't live in the same perspective as everybody else, because I think I have a global family and a global social life and a global everything. So I just feel I feel at home everywhere I travel. And people don't understand that. They go, what do you do for vacation? And I go, well, if you're doing what you love, why do you need to get away from it? You love doing it. Athena and I sat and chatted with Tom Jones one night, and he was doing singing 250 days a year. He loves what he does. So I love what I'm doing. I don't think of, I want to get away from that. I can't wait to get up in the morning and do what I love to do. That's what I do every day.
I love that answer. It's just the most beautiful answer.
Well, that's what I do. Yeah. If there were 400 days in a year, I'd do 400. This year I'm going to do 400 plus speeches. I want to set a goal to do at least 400 speeches. I'm going to definitely break that this year. And if there were 500, I could do 500, I'd do 500.
Well, in those speeches and workshops, what would be one or two of the questions that people most ask you related to The Secret?
Well, the number one question I've received around the world is, how do I stay focused?
And the answer?
And the answer is very simple. Set objectives that are truly congruent and aligned to your highest values. Because if you do, you will automatically visualize what you want, affirm what you want, think about what you want, be inspired by what you want, and act towards what you want spontaneously. But if you set goals that are not congruent, you will need outside motivation to keep you focusing on something that's not truly your inspiration. See, there's a difference between inspiration and motivation. Inspiration is when you set goals that are of your highest values, and motivation is when you set goals injected by others that are on your lowest values and you're trying to be somebody you're not. Set the goals that are truly your inspiration. Look at what your life demonstrates as important to you and make sure they set goals that are truly yours. And then don't let anybody on the face of the earth stop you from living those. And do whatever it takes, travel whatever distance, pay whatever price to go and make them happen.
So many questions. I often say there's so many questions. We've just been given the wind up though, so we're at the end of the show. What would be some last John Demartini words to our viewers?
So many people, because they have compared themselves to other people and then beat themselves up because they're not living up to what other people, or they expect other people think about them, they beat themselves up. I'd say that no matter what you've done or not done, you're worthy of love. I want everybody to know that. I set a goal to reach that 7 billion people with that message, that no matter what you've done or not done, you're worthy of love. There is nothing but love ultimately. All else is illusion. If we don't see it, we have the responsibility to keep looking until we see it. And so if you don't see something worthy of love in yourself or in others, you must look again. As Albert Einstein said, if God is omnipotent and omnipresent and omniscient, then all experiences must be part of divinity. And I don't mean that from a theological perspective necessarily, but I'm just saying that there's a hidden order in life, and we have to learn to ask quality questions to have a quality life, to see it. And when we ask questions that bring us back into balance and feel love again, we've mastered our life. I said on The Secret, when the voice and the vision on the inside becomes more profound than all opinions on the outside, you've now begun to master your life.
And the power of forgiveness?
I actually don't teach forgiveness. Forgiveness assumes there's something
That was wrong.
that wasn't part of the divine plan, part of the magnificence. So I teach people that if there's any forgiveness, I say, thank you for giving me this experience.
The learnings, the teachings.
Yeah, because I don't, in the breakthrough experience, when people finish the Demartini method, not one person has ever said, I forgive somebody. Because there's nothing there to forgive. There's something of a higher order that's something to be grateful for and to love. So I would say that if you had only 24 hours to live your life, you would say, thank you, I love you to the people who've contributed to your life. That's what you'd want to do. And everybody across the world wants to be loved and appreciated for who they are. So as far as I'm concerned, love and gratitude is the cornerstone of the magnificent life.
And the power of the secret.
That's the secret.
John, thank you so much for being on the program with us.
Thank you.
Perhaps another time also.
I look forward to it.